All right, everyone, welcome back to Talking Soccer. I'm your host, Justin Horniker, and we are going to talk about the newly released U.S. men's national team roster. I have a little bit of an issue. Let's just get that out of the way. I think there are some good aspects of this roster. There are some bad aspects of this roster. Ultimately, with what we knew about the injuries coming in, I wasn't totally surprised with a few of the picks. I was surprised with most notably one exemption, but I think in general, this is probably the best roster outside of the forward group that we could have bought. And I'm not sure that, bringing a different set of forwards necessarily changes things. I think this team, for the most part, is going to thrive through its midfield, and it's a really talented midfield. It always was going to be. You just have to hope that you're not relying on, let's say your fourth best defender to come on at center back for any crucial roles. Aaron Long is a vibes guy. I appreciate that, but I don't want him anywhere close to that England game. All right, so let's start with, I'm going to take it group by group: forwards, midfielders, defenders, goalkeepers, and then I want to talk about, what I want to look for in my starting 11. I'll have some videos later on as we get closer to, it's only less than 2 weeks away, so next week I'm going to talk about the matchups a little bit more, but let's talk about this forward group. So making the team, you have Haji Wright, Tim Weah, Josh Sargent, Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic, Jordan Morris, and Jesus Ferreira. So you might notice that there are a couple pretty big exclusions from this list in Jordan Pivok and in Ricardo Pepi. Okay. Now, let's talk about Pivok first, because I kind of understand that. Pivok has been, not in great form lately, but still, he's a starting striker for Union Berlin, who have been threatening to win the Bundesliga this year. And when you look at this forward roster, especially when we're thinking about our out-and-out strikers, there's a real lack of dudes doing it in top leagues, like Josh Sargent is in the Championship. Haji Wright is in the Scottish Premiership, which, if you know anything about Scottish Premiership, he plays for Rangers. The only real tough team he's going to play is, when they're playing CCV and when they're playing Celtic. Outside of that, the Premiership has, if you can even say, defenders on the level of MLS. You're just not going up against top competition. And I look at the starting strikers that we have, and I worry about that. But when talking to Greg Berhalter during the broadcast, he gave us some explanations for why certain players were there and certain players were. But I have a huge issue with that too, because if you're going to run on form, that's perfectly fine. Take your hottest strikers, bring them to the team. If you're running on skill, that's fine. If you believe that one player is just better, so say Christian Pulisic was on a bad run of form, there's no way that he's not making the team. But there's no out-and-out striker in this group that is just so talented that even if they're in bad form, you can't bring them. However, when you look at, what Jesus Ferreira has done this past MLS season, he did not have a good end of the year. And if you watch the playoff game, Dallas against Austin FC, Jesus was very ineffective, and he's missed sitters all year long. It's an issue because, if you're bringing Haji Wright because of his form, like Haji Wright is in great form, if you're bringing Sargent because of his form, Sargent's great in the Championship. Ricardo Pepi has been in amazing form in the Eredivisie, and they don't bring him. And Ricardo Pepi is a guy who you relied on throughout qualifying when he didn't have good club form. When he was at Augsburg and he was sitting out, or he wasn't playing, and the chance he did get, he was snatching at. Now he's actually starting for an Eredivisie team, which, granted, that's not top tier competition, but it's, on level with MLS. Pepi and Ferreira are facing a similar level of defensive skill every week, and Ricardo Pepi has 5 goals in 8 games. He has 2 assists on the season, and he just had an assist last week. If you're going to be bringing players based on form, you have to bring Ricardo Pepi. It does not make sense to me how Jesus Ferreira can make this team over Ricardo Pepi if that is the rationale that you're giving. Now, Jordan Pefok, it was rumored that he was injured a little bit, but that's not the issue with Pepi. So here's what Greg Berhalter said. In the case of Ricardo, that was a very difficult decision that I had to have with him. Berhalter then goes on to explain that Sargent and Haji Wright are in good form, so they had to be on the team, and that Ferreira has, quote, been good for us in the past. So has Ricardo Pepi. Like, what are we talking about here? Honestly, like, I would be so much more fine with this team if I just never heard Greg Berhalter talk, because nothing he ever says makes sense. Nothing makes sense here. Nothing. Jesus Ferreira has not been in good form. He's been sitting on the sidelines for the past 3 weeks. You have a guy scoring in Europe already that you're not bringing, even though you relied on him during qualifications. Like, what are we doing, Greg? Anyway, I gotta fucking move on. So, I don't know. Whatever. They're gonna ride or die by this guy. Let's move on to the midfield so I can actually talk about something good. Midfielders, we have Brendan Aronson, Kellen Acosta, Tyler Adams, Luca De La Torre, which, all right, now that we've gotten the Ricardo Pepi conversation out of the way, Luca De La Torre is on this team. You cannot hurt me anymore. Do not try to hurt me anymore. Jordan McKennie, Yunus Musa, and Christian Roldan. I actually like this midfield. I know some people are going to take offense with Roldan making the team, but like between Roldan and Morris, you can take offense with those Sounders being there, but honestly, like, it's so good to have those guys there. And I don't know, like, how much are you really relying on Christian Roldan? If you have to throw him in, like, I think he brings something that no one else on the team necessarily brings. He brings a level of physicality, a level of just like, shithousery to him that you just have to respect. And like, you're playing Brendan Aronson. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how they fit all these guys in, because I always like the MMA midfield. I think if you go Musa, Adams, McKennie, like, that to me is when we're at our best. But if, say, Musa or McKennie are off their game a little bit, then it becomes like, okay, what do you do with Brendan Aronson? Because Brendan Aronson has been pretty good in the Premier League this year as well. I think, Tyler Adams, watching Leeds the past couple weeks, is in very good form. So as long as Adams is at the 6, like, that midfield is going to be good. McKennie has been bouncing back, coming back from injury. Yunus Musa has looked pretty good for Valencia this year as well. I'm happy with that. Luca De La Torre gives you something different that those guys don't give as well. I would have maybe liked to see Georgi Mihalovic here over Christian Roldan, but honestly, it's not something to get that worked up about. You're talking about the margins at that point. I know that's funny that I just yelled about Ricardo Pepi for 2 minutes, but I had feelings. All right, let's move on to the defenders now. Cameron Carter-Vickers, CCV. I was actually really happy to see CCV on this roster. Serginho Dest, Aaron Long, Shaq Moore, which is very surprising to me. I'm a big Shaq Moore fan, but I did not have him on this roster. Tim Ream, love that. Anthony Robinson, Joe Scally, DeAndre Yedlin, and Walker Zimmerman. I think this defensive core is fine. Like, with the injuries to Chris Richards, of course, with the injury to Miles Robinson, like, those caveats out of the way, I'm good with this defensive core. You have a lot of depth at wingback, which I think is important to the way that we play. You're a little bit worried that if, say, Walker Zimmerman gets hurt, or if, say, Tim Ream gets hurt, but like, if your starting center backs are getting hurt, what do you have left anyway? If you're putting Aaron Long in at that point, we deserve to just go out in the group stage. All right, and then finally on to, probably one of the bigger talking points outside of Ricardo Pepi, goalkeepers. You have Horvath, you have Sean Johnson, and of course the presumed starter in Matt Turner. I think it's probably right. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have wanted Zach Steffen on this team, but Zach Steffen has not looked great. If you haven't been following his play, it's been an issue. It's been worrying. If you are just now checking in and seeing that Zach Steffen isn't on this team, like, I don't think it's out of the question. Like, obviously he moved to Middlesbrough on loan. He's had a couple of good games, but like, his spot mob rating is 6.6. Like, that just tells you that it's not been consistent. He has been letting in goals, has not put up a clean sheet since October, early October, or I guess late October with Huddersfield Town, but he has not been great. And I think, playing in the championship, if you look at kind of Horvath's stats, you're going to find something that's really similar. And I think when I watch Zach Steffen play, I'm just looking at a player that just doesn't have confidence. Sean Johnson was good for NYC this year. I think Turner is the starter with how Zach Steffen's been playing. And Horvath, I think, won his opportunity. He's had a couple of bad games here and there, but for the most part, like, he's been a much more solid goalkeeper in the same exact league as Zach Steffen. And I don't think that you can have too many qualms there. If you want to say that Turner's play in the championship over Sean Johnson's play in MLS, like, maybe that's something that you can bring up. But I think Johnson's been good this year. He's been a very good shot stopper at the very least. And I don't know. I don't think it's that surprising to me. If you've watched Steffen has been better lately. Looking at those numbers again, that kind of made me second guess. But especially like a month ago, he was not playing well. So that's what you look at when you're looking at this roster. Those are the initial snubs for me if I am making this lineup. So let's put this graphic up after I talk about it. I am going to probably start Josh Sargent up top, or maybe Haji Wright. But I think my issue there is you haven't seen a lot of Haji Wright with this team throughout qualifying, right? And definitely not starting. And while Haji Wright has experience with all these guys through the youth lineups, like, maybe that's not as big of a deal, especially since he was on those teams with Christian Pulisic coming up. But I think I'd start Sargent, although I wouldn't be mad with Haji Wright starting. But it'll probably be Jesus Ferreira if we're being real. And then what do you do there? Do you put Reyna and Pulisic on the wings, or do you move Reyna more centrally where he plays a little bit better? What do you do with Tim Weah? I think I'm leaving Tim Weah on the bench. I want Tim Weah to come in as a super sub. I think I'm starting Christian Pulisic, I'm starting Reyna. I need those two on the field, and then I'm going to have my MMA midfield. Now, I would not be opposed to, say, Musa Adams, Reyna, or do I want... Musa's been playing a little better than McKennie. As much as I love Weston, sometimes he's rough on the ball, even though you kind of want his aerial and his scoring ability. But, okay, if I'm saying that Weston McKennie's coming off the bench, I'm going to move... I like that a little bit better, actually. I'm going to move Reyna in centrally, have him next to Musa, have Tyler Adams be that 6. Then I'm going to start Tim Weah. I'm going to start Josh Sargent. I'm going to start Christian Pulisic. So that's my front line. And then moving down, I'm going to have Anthony Robinson, of course, Tim Ream. I'm going to have Walker Zimmerman, and then Sergiño Dest. And then starting, of course, Matt Turner. So that's my starting 11. I could be convinced to go back to that MMA midfield. Let's be honest. Don't take my word at it. But that's kind of the lineup I would like to see. Cameron Carter-Vickers has also been really playing well, so I would not be opposed to having him start over Walker Zimmerman. I don't think that's going to happen just with where Zimmerman's role is in the hierarchy. Where's Tim Ream's role as well as Tim Ream? I mean, Tim Ream's been playing well for Fulham. I'm not angry about him starting at all. Like, those decisions don't get me as fired up as, say, just completely leaving Ricardo Pepi off the team. So I know we got a little bit fired up there early. Glad I could bring us back down and leave on a positive note. Ultimately, what really struck me from this broadcast was when they had the FaceTime of the players being told that they made the team, and they're all talking about how this is a dream come true for them. And that really kind of sold me on Qatar. I have been kind of playing with just not covering Qatar at all because of the fact that I feel uncomfortable giving Qatar any sort of coverage. But honestly, I think that's me being selfish in a way. Obviously it means a lot to the players having American media covering them in my little tiny corner of the American media world, little baby tiny corner. It gets me excited to get behind these guys. And when you hear that, especially me as a St. Louis and Tim Ream, Josh Sargent, those are my two dudes, right? Just a couple of St. Louis guys making the national team, making a World Cup team. To hear them talk about how it's a lifelong dream come true. Hear them talk about the pain of missing out last time around and to actually make the roster. that definitely gave me feelings. It definitely gave me something to think about. So let me know what you think about this roster down in the comments below. Is there a snub that I didn't talk about that you feel like should have made the team? Is there somebody on the team that you absolutely love the inclusion of? Luca Del Torre, let's just say. And of course, if it's your first time around, hit that subscribe button, and we will talk again sometime very soon.